Week 8 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units. I have as sleepers this week. The first one, the New York Giants, out there in 95% of fantasy leagues. They got the most sacks in the league this season. I know they're giving up a bunch of points. I know they don't create a lot of turnovers. And this week, a decent matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know Russell Wilson came back into the starting lineup last week. He had a big ball game, no doubt about it, for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. But I believe this New York Giant defense could get pressure on him, get to him a few times at sacks. And then the whole thing is about creating turnovers and keeping their point total down. So I definitely could see this ball game be a grinded out ball game on Monday Night Football. So the last few weeks for this Giant DST, Week 5 at Seattle, 14 points allowed, 7 sacks, a fumble recovery, a block kick, touchdown, 10 that game. Week 6 versus Cincinnati, 17 points allowed, 4 sacks, a fumble recovery. And Week 7 versus the Eagles, they give up 28 points, but like I said, the sacks are always there, even with Thibodeau out for this New York Giant team with 5 sacks. So this week, like I said, at the Steelers, I think they could get Russell Wilson down a few times. It just comes down to creating some turnovers, holding the point total down. The next DST is the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, I know it's a division matchup where they didn't do well versus Tampa Bay offense a few weeks ago, but now you take Chris Godwin and Mike Evans out of the equation for Tampa Bay. I think there's going to be times where they're going to have trouble moving the football on this one, and they could create turnovers. We know Baker Mayfield, he's been great, no doubt about it, over the last couple seasons, but he's still throwing a decent amount of interceptions, still taking some big hits and some sacks. And maybe in this one, without his top 2 wideouts, this Falcon defense could be a sleeper option, available in 90% of fantasy leagues. Week 5 versus Tampa, 30 points allowed, a sack, a fumble recovery. Week 6 at Carolina, 20 points allowed, 2 interceptions. And Week 7 versus Seattle, 28 points and a sack. So I know this defense hasn't been good at all, is this Atlanta Falcon DST. But like I said, we'll see how Baker Mayfield operates his offense and performs without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in this one. So if you want to take a shot in deeper leagues, I have this Falcons as a sleeper option. And the final defense DST I have as sleepers, the Washington Commanders, to the young rookie quarterback Caleb Williams coming to town. And we know this Commander team's going to be without Jaden Daniels most likely in this ball game. And this defense, believe it or not, the last 2 out of 3 weeks, double-digit fantasy points. Week 5 versus the Browns, 13 points allowed, 7 sacks, a fumble recovery. Week 6 at the Ravens in a shootout loss, 30 points allowed, 2 sacks, and INT. And Week 7 versus the Panthers, they had their way with them in that ball game. 7 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, including a pick 6. So this defense has definitely improved over the last couple weeks. I know they had an easy matchup versus Carolina last week where they turned the football over and things just can't go their way. But Panthers have had their way all season long versus Carolina. But this week, like I said, young quarterback Caleb Williams coming to town. Dan Quinn, we know he's a great defense coordinator with the Cowboys and has a lot of input on this defense, even though he's the head coach for this Commander team, obviously. And I think the Commanders is a deep league sleeper, could go out there and have a decent game, available in 87% of fantasy leagues. That's a few defense DST units I have as sleepers for Week 8 of the fantasy football season.